Number 2. I had this supervisor named Kate. One day we had a discussion that turned into the unexplained, and she told me about something that happened when she was a teenager. She tries to debunk crazy things that have happened, but this one she hasn't been able to. It was the summer after she graduated from high school, sometime in the late 1990s. She was 18 at the time. Her friend Billy was a few years older, but still lived with his mother. It was a small city in western Maryland, and Billy's house had just enough land that he could throw raging day-to-night summer parties, complete with bonfires. At the time, they weren't totally isolated, and random people from the surrounding neighborhoods would show up at his parties all the time. One day, Billy met this skater kid named Nick at a park, and being a social animal guy, Billy invited him over to hang out with him at his house. Billy probably also took pity on Nick because Nick told him that he was a runaway who was living at the park. They would basically play video games, go on rides, and party until late at night. Nick started showing up every day at Billy's house, knocking on the door at 7 a.m., and engaging in some morning until night drinking. He was about 16, dark eyes and dark spiky hair. Remember, this was the late 90s. He seemed fairly normal and everything, except for a few things. The first was that he was always wearing the same thing, a plain t-shirt and a pair of camo print cargo shorts. Despite the fact he was always sleeping at a park, his clothes always looked clean. The second is that he was never seen eating or going to the bathroom, despite the fact that Nick was always drinking heavily with Billy. Finally, oddly enough, no one remembers actually feeling Nick's skin, even my supervisor, who had sat next to him in a car during a road trip. She hung out with Billy and Nick at Billy's house 2 times, and each time, both her and her friend felt like something was off with Nick, especially when he would give off this laugh that just sounded very evil and maniacal. He also seemed to get weirder when they went on a road trip and got further away from Billy's city. Nick would also never shut up about his father's gun collection. Finally, Billy's hospitality had reached its limits. After 2 weeks of waking up to Billy at 7 a.m. to go and party, Billy snapped at Nick at his front door. He said, "Look, Nick, you've been coming here every morning for 2 weeks. You're waking up my mother who is trying to sleep. You really need to go now. Please just come back later." He then slammed the door shut. Nick never showed up again. Billy came to Katie a bit later with a newspaper article. It was about Nick, who had apparently killed himself. Nick had escaped from the mental asylum his parents had put him in that was located in Billy's town. He broke into his father's house and shot himself with one of his father's guns. Billy was originally upset because he felt like he must have pushed Nick over the edge when he kicked him out, until he checked the dates. Nick had committed suicide on July 10th, 2 weeks before they met. Number 1. Every year, me and my family would go to our cabin that was located in literally the middle of nowhere, completely 100% isolated. To get to this location, we first have to drive 4.5 hours north into the country. Then there is a 25-mile gravel road driveway, in which takes you past different forest areas, abandoned century-old farmhouses, and bare untouched land. The area where the cabin is located in used to be part of a bustling town in the mid-1700s, full of fish and dairy factories, a school, hotel, and other things before it was abandoned in the early 1900s. The town has a dark history. Firstly, a bunch of school kids playing out in the main wharf drowned because the rotten bridge had collapsed under them. Secondly, the daughter of the hotel owner suffered serious mental health issues and drowned her infant baby brother before she hung herself. Lastly, a 17-year-old male, we'll call him John, also suffered from an array of mental health disabilities, including severe bipolar and schizophrenia. John's poor mental health had apparently resulted in him pursuing a dozen of the local children to come play on a beach, where he had said a bonfire was set up. He then proceeded to shoot 11 of the children and then beat the final child to death by bashing his head with a piece of driftwood. There are people who dismiss this event as bullshit, as there isn't much historical evidence or records on it. But many people believe it to be very true, and after what me and my family experienced, we believe it to be authentic. My grandfather first bought the property to store his boat, but we started camping down there, which resulted in turning the boat shed into a cabin and a yearly tradition. He was unaware of this history until 10 years after he bought the property. Knowing this history didn't really seem to affect us. We still enjoyed going there every year, up until what happened. It was 2013, and me and my family were there for our yearly exclusion from civilization, enjoying the summer, great food, and just spending time with each other. Before I go any further, I would like to say that I've been going to this place ever since I was born, because it's been in my family for 40 years. I am now 19. It was our final night there, and we were all in the main living room area, telling scary stories and reminiscing on old times spent there. At about 2:30 a.m., I awoke to the sound of feet running in the sand outside of the cabin. The cabin is literally on the beach, so much so that when the tide comes, it's practically underneath the cabin, so all you can hear is the gentle waves and sounds of the country night. It sounded like someone was just running up and down past our cabin. At first, I thought it was my father coming back from floundering, but soon realized he was sleeping in the bunk to the left of me. I just sat there listening for about 2 minutes before I woke my dad to listen with me. As soon as I woke my dad, the sound of running stopped. I told my dad about it, and he said that it could have been some kind of animal. I fell asleep after about 10 minutes, only to be awoken again 30 minutes later to the most terrifying fucking sound I've ever heard. It sounded like a set of deep, inhuman growls coming from underneath the cabin. The growls awoke my whole family, who sat up and listened until they stopped. I'll never forget the look on my dad's face. He looked so terrified. We would usually get him to go inspect something like this, but we didn't want anyone leaving. About several minutes passed before the growling came to a complete stop. We sat there in silence, trying to figure out what it was, even though I knew it wasn't anything remotely human. I will add that up until this point, I didn't believe in the paranormal. We dismissed it as some kind of animal, and eventually fell back asleep. But I was awoken again, about an hour later, with the feeling of someone or something staring at me. It's hard to explain, but it was like an immense thick energy in my surroundings. I remember being all sweaty because I had my head in my sleeping bag in 80-degree heat, refusing to look around me. This lasted for about 10 minutes before curiosity got the better of me, and I just had to look around the room. I put my head up, and what I saw will never leave my head. It makes me ill just thinking about it. Near the back door of the cabin, there was a large window located next to it, which overlooks a small deck. There was a large, broad, hooded black figure, very still, just standing there. I could not see a face, just the outline of what looked like something or someone draped in black clothing. It had to have been 6'7" or 7 foot to reach the high position that it was in. I felt paralyzed and just stared back at it for at least 2 minutes before the loudest, deepest growl came from the direction of the figure. It woke my whole family, so I jumped out of my sleeping bag, and while I wasn't looking at it, it disappeared. I gathered myself almost in tears from fear to tell my family what I had just seen. We didn't go back to sleep because what we had just witnessed, and because I was still in a shocking state from my anxiety. The next day, my uncle came to visit. I told him what happened the night before, and he revealed something that still fucks me up to this day. He said that the land that the cabin was built on belonged to the mother of John. She had apparently held numerous satanic rituals in her home and had severely abused John, which had probably resulted in his mental health issues. My uncle said he knew this because his friend, who is a priest near the old town, had relatives who passed down this information. He said he didn't believe it, so he didn't bother mentioning it to us, in fear that it would make us not want to come visit anymore. I can confidently say that we now see it as the truth. Thankfully, my uncle got his priest friend to bless the property shortly after. I don't know why any paranormal activity just occurred that one time when it could have happened during the 40 years my family had been going there. Also, despite that emotionally scarring event, we still visit every year. The days there are beautiful in the summer, but in the evenings. Hey guys, Unit 522 here, and I want to thank you very much for watching my video. I would appreciate it very much if you would share, like, and comment. And if you're new to this channel, become one with the Unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story or experience that you want featured on this channel, you can always send it to my email or post it on the Free Horror Stories subreddit. The links for those can be found in the description below. If you would like to help out this channel even more, consider a PayPal donation. And for more updates, be sure to follow me on Twitter. There's nothing wrong with a little darkness in your life, as long as you never forget there's always a reason to be afraid.